Let's go back to one of our top stories, the fight against fentanyl. Joining us from Albuquerque, New Mexico is Mike Vigil. He is the former chief of international operations for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. Thank you so much for joining us. Mike, first of all, how significant is China's recent crackdown on fentanyl with more regulations and designations of this drug?
Well, actually, I applaud the Chinese government for taking this significant step to control fentanyl and all of its analogs. In the past, as you well know, when the Chinese government tried to regulate it, a lot of these chemists would change the molecular structure of fentanyl, which meant that the Chinese government had to move forward to try to control it, and that would take 8 months to a year. At the same time, through this measure, the Chinese government can go after the manufacturers who would skirt Chinese law, again, by changing the molecular structure. So it is a very significant step, and I think the Chinese government are doing everything in its power to try to regulate, the manufacture and distribution of this deadly drug.
What do you say to the argument that you need to attack illegal drugs from the demand side? What more needs to be done in the United States to quell the demand for fentanyl, and why doesn't it seem to be working?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's a very complex problem. It's not only the fentanyl coming in from China, but at the same time, we have the pharmaceutical companies that push opioids such as fentanyl, and then you have doctors that overprescribe fentanyl and other opioids, and a lot of that has led to the opioid epidemic that we currently suffer in the United States. And last year, at least 30,000 U.S. citizens died from fentanyl overdoses.
So for those who don't really know much about fentanyl, why is there such a big demand for it, and why is it so addictive?
Well, fentanyl is a painkiller, and it is 50 times stronger than heroin. So that kind of gives you an idea of how addictive and how deadly this drug is. So we need to do a lot better. I think that our politicians have got to stop talking about the problem and start coming up with solutions. We need solutions. We need policies that are going to have some impact here in the United States. And China is stepping up to the plate, and we need to do the same.
You mentioned doctors in the United States, but I want to point out a statistic I saw earlier today. U.S. Customs and Border Control had its biggest bust of fentanyl earlier this year at the border, coming in from Mexico and Arizona. So it's not just coming from China. We're seeing some coming in from Mexico, other countries perhaps. What are drug enforcement agencies seeing right now?
Well, we're seeing Mexico as a transshipment point for fentanyl coming in from China, but at the same time, the Mexican cartels are now starting to engage in the manufacture of fentanyl. So it shouldn't only be a crackdown on the finished product, fentanyl, but we need to control the precursor chemicals and stop them from coming into the United States, going into Mexico, and into other areas that would preclude a lot of these criminal organizations from actually manufacturing the drug. So you're right, Mexico is starting to engage, and I predict that Mexico will shift from heroin production more so into fentanyl, which would be, more lucrative for them.
All right, Mike Vigil in Albuquerque, New Mexico, thank you.